There's a specific reason CBS has been nicknamed the Tiffany Network since the 1940s, a name meant to evoke old money prestige, elegance, class above its competitors. And for most of television history, when it came to comedy specifically, that nickname wasn't just marketing. CBS didn't just occasionally produce a hit sitcom. For long stretches of the 20th and 21st centuries, it essentially owned the format, building entire eras of American culture around a single Thursday or Saturday night lineup. But here's what makes CBS's sitcom story genuinely strange compared to any other networks. It isn't a single rise, followed by a single fall, the way you'd expect from a normal business trajectory. It's happened multiple times. CBS has built comedy empires, watched them completely collapse, and then, against every outside prediction, rebuilt an entirely new empire from scratch, more than once, using a completely different playbook each time. And right now, in the middle of the 2020s, CBS finds itself asking the exact same question it's had to answer at least 3 separate times in the last 70 years. What happens after the reign ends? By the end of this video, you'll understand the actual pattern hiding underneath CBS's entire comedy history, and why that pattern might already be quietly repeating itself again right now, whether anyone at the network wants to admit it or not. Let's go all the way back to the beginning, because CBS didn't just participate in the birth of the sitcom. In a very real sense, it invented the entire template. When I Love Lucy premiered on CBS in 1951, it didn't just become a massive hit. It fundamentally reshaped how television comedy would be produced for the next 70 years. The show's 3-camera, live studio audience format, engineered specifically so star Lucille Ball could perform live in front of a real crowd while still capturing multiple camera angles, became the technical and creative blueprint nearly every sitcom that followed would build on. CBS didn't just get lucky with one hit show. It got lucky with the format that would define an entire industry. Through the 1950s and into the 1960s, CBS rode that early advantage into a comfortable, dependable string of hits. Folksy, broadly appealing shows built around small towns, rural settings, and gentle family conflict. The Andy Griffith Show, The Beverly Hillbillies, Green Acres. These weren't just popular, they were dominant, consistently ranking among the most watched programs on all of American television. By the end of the 1960s, though, that comfortable dominance had started to calcify into something closer to a trap. CBS's audience was aging, its programming increasingly viewed by advertisers as reliably rural, older, and, crucially, less valuable to the exact demographic Madison Avenue was chasing hardest: younger, urban, higher-spending viewers. So CBS did something almost unthinkable for a network sitting comfortably at the top of the ratings. It burned its own house down on purpose. In 1971, in a sweeping programming decision that television historians still refer to as the Rural Purge, CBS's new head of programming canceled roughly a dozen of its own long-running hit shows in a single stretch: Green Acres, Petticoat Junction, The Beverly Hillbillies, Hee Haw, Mayberry RFD, even the network's own beloved Lassie, none of them failing shows, several of them still pulling respectable ratings, all of them cut loose specifically because their audience skewed too old and too rural for what CBS believed television's future actually looked like. In their place, CBS bet everything on something almost nobody in the industry had tried at this scale before: sitcoms that looked directly at the messy, divisive reality of contemporary American life, rather than retreating from it. The Mary Tyler Moore Show, premiering in 1970, followed a single-career woman navigating a newsroom in Minneapolis, a radical premise for the era. All in the Family, which ABC had actually rejected twice before CBS reluctantly picked it up, put a working-class bigot named Archie Bunker at the center of primetime, using his outdated, often ugly views as the friction point for weekly comedy that tackled race, feminism, and generational conflict head-on, opening its very first broadcast with an actual disclaimer warning viewers about the content ahead. The gamble paid off almost immediately, and spectacularly. By the end of 1971, All in the Family was the #1 show in America, and it stayed there for years. Its creator, Norman Lear, went on to build an entire empire of spin-offs and companion shows for CBS: Maude, Good Times, The Jeffersons, One Day at a Time, each one continuing to push socially conscious comedy into homes that had never seen anything quite like it on network television before. By 1973, CBS had assembled what television historians frequently describe as the single greatest night of scheduled comedy in the medium's history. A Saturday lineup running All in the Family, The Mary Tyler Moore Show, The Bob Newhart Show, MASH, and The Carol Burnett Show, back to back to back to back to back, an unbroken stretch of quality that no network before or since has ever quite matched in one single night. That first great CBS comedy era, though, eventually cooled, the way every television era eventually does. Audience tastes shifted again through the 1980s, new competitors emerged. NBC built its own dominant comedy block through the 1980s and into the 1990s, anchored by shows that made Thursday night appointment viewing for an entire generation. CBS's once untouchable comedy identity drifted, and by the mid-1990s, the network that had practically invented the modern sitcom found itself scrambling. Its comedy lineup, no longer the cultural center of gravity it had been 20 years earlier. The bridge between that first collapse and CBS's eventual second rise came quietly, built around a handful of dependable, if less culturally explosive, hits. Everybody Loves Raymond, premiering in 1996, and King of Queens, following a year later, gave CBS a foothold again. Broad, family-centered, blue-collar comedy that never quite reached the cultural earthquake of All in the Family, but proved reliably, consistently popular for years. Raymond, in particular, would go on to become the last multi-camera sitcom to ever win the Emmy for Outstanding Comedy Series. Back in 2005, a genuinely symbolic bookend to that entire style of comedy's era of mainstream critical respect. These shows weren't the second golden age themselves. They were the scaffolding CBS quietly kept standing while it figured out what its next big swing was actually going to be. And then, CBS did something it would repeat almost exactly, decades later. It found one person and let that person quietly rebuild the entire comedy division from the ground up. That person was Chuck Lorre. Starting in the 1990s with contributions to Roseanne, Grace Under Fire, and Sybil, and accelerating dramatically through the 2000s with 2.5 Men, Lorre began building what would eventually become the second great CBS comedy empire, one built specifically and almost defiantly around the traditional multi-camera, live audience format. At the exact moment, much of the rest of the industry was declaring that format creatively dead. 2.5 Men became the highest-rated comedy in America for years. Then, starting in 2007, The Big Bang Theory arrived. Initially a modest hit about a group of socially awkward physicists, gradually growing into an outright cultural phenomenon, eventually becoming the longest-running multi-camera sitcom in television history, spinning off Young Sheldon, a prequel following the character's childhood, which itself became CBS's #1 comedy the moment its predecessor finally ended. For over 2 decades, Chuck Lorre was, in an almost unprecedented way, for a single individual, functionally synonymous with CBS's entire comedy identity. 2.5 Men, The Big Bang Theory, Mike and Molly, Mom, Young Sheldon. One man's name appeared attached to CBS's comedy lineup in some form continuously for 21 straight years, which makes what happened next feel less like a gradual decline and more like watching a single load-bearing wall get removed all at once. The Big Bang Theory ended in 2019, closing out its historic 12-season run as one of the most watched comedies of its entire era. Young Sheldon followed it into the sunset in May of 2024, wrapping up after 7 seasons with an emotional finale that tied directly back into its predecessor's story. 10 days after that, Bob Hart's Abishola, another CBS multi-camera comedy, also signed off after 5 seasons. For the first time in 21 years, Chuck Lorre didn't have a single show actively airing on the CBS comedy schedule. It's genuinely difficult to overstate how strange that gap felt to anyone who had spent 2 decades watching CBS's entire comedy identity essentially flow through one creative pipeline. This collapse didn't happen in isolation either. It arrived at almost the exact moment the entire broadcast television business was contracting all at once. Writers and actors' strikes had disrupted production schedules across the industry. Streaming had permanently reshaped where audiences, particularly younger audiences, were spending their attention. Aging broadcast shows had become significantly more expensive to produce relative to the audiences they were still reliably pulling in. In that single 2024 season alone, CBS said goodbye to Young Sheldon, Bob Hart's Abishola, and several of its long-running dramas in the same few months. A wave of endings industry analysts pointed to as a genuine inflection point for the entire broadcast model, not just CBS specifically. There's an economic wrinkle to this entire story that's worth pausing on, because it explains why CBS, more than any other major broadcast network, kept betting on a format everyone else had written off: multi-camera comedy, filmed quickly and cheaply in front of a live audience, has always been dramatically less expensive to produce per episode than the cinematic single-camera comedies that dominated streaming and critical conversation. For a network whose core audience has increasingly skewed older, viewers who still watch live, scheduled broadcast television rather than streaming on their own time, that combination of lower production costs and a large, dependable, habitual audience made the format financially rational for CBS long after it had become commercially unfashionable everywhere else. Critics could call the format dated all they wanted. The math still worked. So is this it? Is this the moment the story simply ends? The third act, where the empire that survived the rural purge and rebuilt itself around Chuck Lorre finally just runs out of runway? Here's where CBS's history actually offers a genuinely useful lesson. Because if there's one thing this network has proven, twice now, across 70 years, it's an almost stubborn willingness to rebuild from scratch rather than accept a permanent decline. Almost immediately after the Big Bang Theory universe wound down, CBS greenlit Georgie and Mandy's First Marriage, a spin-off following two supporting characters from young Sheldon into their own multi-camera series. A direct, deliberate bet that the format itself, live audience, laugh track, 3 cameras in all, still had commercial life left in it, even as critics and prestige-chasing streaming platforms continued treating multi-camera comedy as a relic. Alongside it, new CBS comedies built without any direct connection to the Lorre universe at all have quietly found real audiences, proving the network's comedy engine doesn't necessarily need one singular auteur pulling every string simultaneously, the way it arguably did during both of its previous golden eras. There's something almost poetic in how closely the two men at the center of CBS's two golden ages mirror each other, despite working in almost opposite comedic registers. Norman Lear built his empire by pointing his cameras directly at America's ugliest, most uncomfortable arguments, using comedy as a Trojan horse for genuine social confrontation. Chuck Lorre built his by doing almost the reverse, crafting broad, warm, low-stakes comfort television specifically engineered to help millions of exhausted viewers unwind after a long day, rarely touching anything as politically charged as Archie Bunker's living room. Two completely different philosophies of what a sitcom is even for, and yet both men, working decades apart, delivered CBS the exact same outcome. A period of such total comedy dominance that it's hard to imagine, in the moment, either era ever actually ending. There's a pattern worth sitting with here, one that stretches across every single chapter of this story. CBS's comedy empire has never actually died from natural causes. Each time, the collapse arrived because the network's prior strategy, wholesome rural comedy, single showrunner multi-camera dominance, whatever the era's specific formula happened to be, simply stopped matching where the broader audience and the broader industry were heading next. And each time, rather than quietly accepting the decline, CBS responded with something almost aggressive, a full teardown, followed by a bet on something that, at the moment it was greenlit, looked genuinely risky to almost everyone watching from outside the building. All in the Family looked risky in 1971. A show about physicists looked risky in 2007. A spin-off built around two supporting characters from an already ended franchise looks risky right now. Whether that specific bet pays off the way the previous two did is honestly still an open question, one nobody, including the people currently running CBS, can answer with real confidence yet. But if 70 years of this network's own history is any real guide, betting against CBS's comedy division permanently staying down has been, historically, a genuinely bad bet to make. The Tiffany Network has already proven, more than once, that it's willing to burn down a comfortable, profitable status quo rather than simply ride a slow decline all the way to the bottom. And that willingness, more than any single show or any single showrunner, might be the actual secret behind why CBS keeps finding its way back to the top of the sitcom world, generation after generation, long after outside observers have already written its obituary.